Hi, everybody. This is Cynthia Kane. Welcome back to UL100ZB for week 6. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you the requirements and the expectations for learning assessment number 9 for this week, which covers recommended resources. So currently, we're in our modules portion for UL100ZB on Canvas. And let's scroll down to week number 6. And I'm going to click on Learning Assessment number 9 for recommended resources. Now for Learning Assessment number 9, recommended resources, you're going to be selecting, writing, and submitting 2 separate sources as entries for the recommended resources section of your final web portfolio. We'll be going back to this in just a second to show you the expectations for this particular portion of your final web portfolio during the last week of class. But for this submission, for Learning Assessment number 9, you're going to submit again your URL, your link to your web portfolio on Wix, and make sure that your 2 recommended resources, annotations, are on a page titled Recommended Resources. I will show you how to do that in just a second as well. So for this assignment, we want you to find 2 new sources of information. Do not repeat the 2 sources that you had from your evaluation of sources assignment for this work. So you're going to find 2 new resources for your information. For this assignment, we want you to find a traditional source, such as a complete printed book, a completed ebook, an article from a magazine, a newspaper, or a journal, or perhaps a reputable website or an online journal article from a reputable website as well. Those are considered to be more traditional sources of information because they really are more expected and sometimes more accepted when it comes to research. The second source of information then would be what could be considered a non-traditional source of information. So that might be a video that you find on YouTube. It could be a blog that someone has written about your topic that looks like it contains some fairly useful information that you would recommend for somebody who didn't know anything about your topic. It could also be a personal interview that you go ahead and conduct in person, perhaps recorded, perhaps on the telephone, but it could be an interview from somebody who is an expert in the field. Basically, for a non-traditional source, look for anything that would not actually fit that definition of expected or traditional when it would come to conventional research. If you struggle or if you are having any difficulties trying to think of something that would be a non-traditional source of information for this assessment, don't hesitate to contact me or contact Megan because we would be very happy to brainstorm with you and come up with some ideas. So what you're going to be doing then on your Wix page for your recommended resources is providing the following information. For each of those 2 sources, provide a complete and correct citation either in MLA format or APA format. Now I do want to give you a heads up. We're going to be looking very carefully at these correct citations. Remember that we have given you resources before, such as the OWL at Purdue sites for MLA and APA, that you can check. And also remember that if you are using a tertiary source, like a database or a catalog, to find articles or to find references to books, and if you're using the cite or citation tools features in those databases, those are not always correct. They will give you the elements that you can use for an APA citation or an MLA citation, but you still may have to update them. You're going to have to proofread them very carefully. So copying and pasting probably is not going to be sufficient for that part of the assessment. So then for each of your 2 sources, we want you to write an abstract or a summary of the source in your own words. Make this a minimum of 5 to 6 sentences. And in the abstract or the summary of the source, again, think about somebody who has never read this particular source. They're not familiar with it at all. What is it that you would want to tell them about this source that would summarize it, that would make them want to find the source for themselves? Sometimes that's a good way of thinking about how to write an abstract or a summary. Then, for each of those 2 sources, provide another paragraph of 5 to 6 sentences that would be an evaluation of the source in your own judgment. So think about the scholarship, the credibility, the intended audience, and the overall contribution to your topic. Now for this one, for the evaluation, please go way beyond just saying this is a good source. I like this source. That's really not going to be enough to consider this assessment complete. Why? What was it about the source that made you think it could be recommended? What evidence are you drawing from that source, and how can you summarize that as well? Now, you do not have to turn in this worksheet, but we have provided a worksheet that might help you in terms of working on this particular assessment a little bit more effectively. So this is essentially the structure that we are looking for. Citation number 1 in correct MLA or APA format, the abstract or the summary of the source in your own words, and the evaluation of your source in your own judgment as it relates to the topic. Think about the scholarship, the credibility, the intended audience, and the overall contribution to your topic. And we provided a second worksheet for citation number 2. Again, you don't have to turn in this worksheet because what you are actually going to be submitting is, and I'm going to go back over here, you're going to be submitting again the URL for your Wix portfolio, for your web portfolio. So you might remember that this was the one that I was working on for electronic cigarettes in Wix. And up here, this is where I can create my pages. And I named a page Recommended Resources. So I'm now on the page for Recommended Resources. I left it this way on purpose because you might remember me saying to you that there may be elements, depending upon the template of your portfolio, that you're going to have to get rid of. And that's what I'm doing here. I had some elements on this page that I really don't care for very much. So I'm going to delete these. And the reason I did this is that I want to show you now how to add a text box on this Recommended Resources page where you can put in your 2 recommended resources with the citations and the abstracts or the summaries, and then finally the evaluations for each. Go over here to add. And at this point, you can add different paragraphs. I'm going to click on this. And you can see that's a little bit difficult to see, but that's okay because now I can go over here to edit text. And I can change the font. So I might want to change that to a font that I like a little bit more. Maybe this, it'll show up a little bit more in bold. I can change the font size. You can see that I can change this if I wanted that to be a little bit larger or a little bit easier to see. This is in bold, so I can actually make this even more bold if I want. And this is only one of several fonts that you could select. So there are a lot of different things that you can do. So I'm going to delete this. I'm still in my edit text. And this is where I can start adding my citation for citation number 1 for my first source of information. And then I can keep typing in directly in this particular page. Now, the other thing I could do, though, is I could type this information on that worksheet that I showed you earlier in Canvas, or I could just type my information in a separate Word document, and then I could copy that text and I could just paste that directly into this Wix page for recommended resources. It's really whatever works best for you. But again, remember that you're not submitting the worksheet. You are submitting the URL for your Wix portfolio and your 2 citations, plus the evaluations, plus these the evaluations and plus the summaries. Those are all going to be here on this recommended resources page. So this is actually what you are submitting for this assignment to be considered as complete. Now, sometimes we have some questions from students on how to find these resources. Remember again, to find more traditional sources of information such as books or articles, one of your best ways would be to return to the library's webpage and use library resources or library databases. Again, keep in mind that the discovery search can be used to find books that are owned by the library, either in print form or in electronic form. To find articles, one of your best resources will be to go to the Databases tab. Again, go to All Subjects and find a subject area that relates to your topic and how you would want to approach it. And you might recall from some of our earlier tutorials that I've been going to medicine and health because if I'm searching for articles, perhaps about health-related issues concerning electronic cigarettes, some of these databases might be useful for me to take a look at. We're going to look at Scent All Complete. And again, right now I'm looking for traditional sources of information. I go to an advanced search. And if I go again to abstract, I'm going to type in electronic cigarettes. And sometimes, as you know from earlier tutorials, I will choose electronic cigarettes or e-cigarettes or vaping because I want some variant terms. And I could put in health. And this is going to be a pretty broad search, but that's okay because it gets me started. And I can limit my search here if I only wanted academic journals, again, more traditional sources of information. Now, with this assignment for the recommended resources, you need to have access to the full text. So in other words, if you're using a book, you need to have the actual book, the actual ebook or the actual print book that you can read and summarize. The same holds true for articles. So this one, this first one, I could get an abstract from this, but I don't have the full text. So I would have to see if we actually had access to the full text of this article or find another one that might work. Now this one looks rather interesting, and it has the HTML full text. So I could actually use this one because even though it doesn't have the PDF full text, you see all this text down here is considered to be the full text of the article. So I can read this article completely, and this might be one that I could use for my traditional source in my recommended resources project. Remember again though, when I go over to Cite, and this is a good example. Let's say that I wanted to cite this one in APA style. This is not correct. With APA style, the following words in the title of an article have to be in lowercase. So it's perfectly fine for me to copy and paste this as a citation in my recommended resources page in Wix, but I'm still going to have to go through and correct this article title and put these words that are capitalized in lowercase. Again, please be sure that you are proofreading your citations and not just copying and pasting and thinking that they will be correct, because depending upon the resource that you're using, they may not be correct, and then that won't be a complete assessment. Now, to find a non-traditional source, I'm going to go to YouTube now, because I'm really curious to see if I can find perhaps a video on YouTube that again might deal with health-related issues or health-related concerns when it comes to electronic cigarettes. So let's type in electronic cigarettes. And see what happens. And this is a very interesting search because it does look like I'm getting some rather credible videos that might be rather interesting for me to use as a non-traditional source of information. So this is a very short video, looks like it's a minute, from the Mayo Clinic that talks about are e-cigarettes safe? So I could watch that video and maybe see if I wanted to use that as my non-traditional source for my recommended resources. Here's another one that looks rather interesting. It looks like it is kind of covering how we can talk to kids about the potential dangers of e-cigarettes and vaping. So that might be another one that I could watch. So again, look to see when it comes to your non-traditional sources of information, who's actually publishing that non-traditional source. Does it look like it's coming from an agency or an organization or even an individual who is credible, who is reliable, who knows something about that topic? So with any of these, In order to do the citation correctly, I could go back over here and go back up to one of our previous modules, such as the evaluation of sources. And remember, on the evaluation of sources assessment, we gave you links to the OWL at Purdue site for APA citation style help and MLA citation style help. Please be sure to go back to these links if you're not sure how to create a citation, or if you're not sure if your citation is correct. So for example, if we go to APA, and if I go over here, perhaps to electronic sources, I'm going to scroll down. Again, this is showing me correct ways of citing. And remember, I need to see how to do a YouTube video. So if I found a YouTube video on electronic cigarettes and I wanted to use that as my non-traditional source, this will help me see how to cite this particular YouTube video correctly in the APA format if I'm using APA. Be consistent. If you're using APA, you need to use that for both of your recommended resources. If you're using MLA, you need to use MLA for both of your recommended resources. Let's go back. And again, go back home. The last thing I wanted to show you is the reason we're having you do this learning assessment. If you are creating a web portfolio, for week number 8, this is when you're going to be turning in your completed web portfolio. So this is helping you get started with it. So for the web portfolio, you actually will have to have a total of 5 recommended resources. So if you do this learning assessment for this week, you will have 2 out of the 5 recommended resources on your recommended resources page that will be ready to hand in as part of your completed web portfolio. So that's the other reason we're having you do this assessment, basically to help you get ahead on completing your web portfolio for the last week of our class. And again, remember that what you will submit when I click on Publish, you will submit the URL, the published URL for your Wix portfolio, and be sure that those 2 sources are on your recommended resources page so that we can look at them and then evaluate them accordingly. As always, make sure that you check with me or check with Megan if you have any questions or if any of this seems confusing, and we're more than happy to help you online or in person. Good luck.